Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. Today, as you guys know, I bought an E46 only last week. So today we're going to be doing what to look for when buying a used BMW E46 M Sport. So the first thing we're going to look for is when you walk up to the car, like I did when I bought this one, which I can remember clearly because I only just bought it just recently. I went up to the back, and as you see, goes this M Sport, I checked the rear diffuser. Now the rear diffuser gives a lot of telltale signs, and I'll tell you why. When people hit a lot of curbs or they park too high and they don't give a crap about the car, they will just reverse it and bang it into any curb, and that's how you know. As you know, there's parking sensors on here, as you can see here. Now the 3 Series doesn't have a PDC button, so what you have to do is pull it in reverse to check them they're working. They've been coded out on this, but we are going to be coding them back in. So that's another common problem, is they do fail, but they're not hard to change. They just take this trim off and you can get to them. Same as the E39, they're not like the E60, you've got to remove the whole bumper or put your hand up the bumper. So that's another thing. The next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to check that the boot here, there's no water running into the boot area, because it is a common problem that water will run into the boot area here and probably corrode all these lights as well. I've got another video coming up showing you how to change them to the LCI, to the LED tail lights on them. So that's another common problem. The next one is going to be rust around the arches. Now as you can see, mine doesn't have any rust anywhere. Now that's the first thing, as you guys know, when I went and bought one of these, I looked for was rust all over the arches, as that's a common problem in this country due to the amount of salt we get on the roads. There isn't no rust on this car, as you can see, and when it does rust, it ends up rusting in all the wings here and underneath the seals as well, which are underneath here. Another common problem for rust is the exhaust section. Now as you guys know, this exhaust is blowing on this, and that's because the bolts have been rusty and they've never been changed, so they need to be cut off and have new bolts fitted. As you'll see as well, you just need to check everywhere, because these cars do suffer with rust. Like, it's not nowhere on the wings here, so it's actually very clean, but it's starting to come up right here, as you can see right there on the seal itself. So we have to be careful that doesn't go any further, and it needs to be treated. That's the only bit that I've managed to find that's only got rust, but I think this car is very clean for the age, and it doesn't suffer with severe rust like most other M Sports or any other E46. Another reason why we get the rust here on these E46s is purely because these cars on the M Sports sit very low. So as they sit very low to the road, the salt can get all in the arches and rust the whole wing up, compared to other cars of an SE type. Another common problem on these is the suspension, because they sit so far down on the road, they can mess up the whole suspension system on these cars, and it actually cause it to fail. Obviously when you hit speed humps, it's another common problem. You end up hearing it squeak, or it just bangs, it just doesn't function properly. So that's another thing to look for. Another common issue on these is wheel bearings. Wheel bearings go, as you know, they sit in the hub on these. They've got the ABS ring connected to them, so you need to buy the whole hub together. They are quite cheap now, your 346s, but it's another common problem you need to look for on these, is the ABS system with the wheel bearings. So that's another problem on these you need to look for. Another common problem on the body itself will be the M Sport bumpers. Now, as you guys know, in the UK we have quite high curbs, and what people like to do is when they go up on a curb, if they've got a drive, they haven't got a drop curb, is they'll smash the lip here or crack the lip. I've had quite a few with the lip cracked here. Now you want to be careful they ain't cracked, because they're not easy to repair on these, and they're hard to even get hold of, these M Sport bumpers. As you know, this is the M Tech 2 bumpers, and it's not easy to get hold of, as they're very rare and sought after now, because everyone who's written them off or buying them, crash cars, are wanting to repair them. The next thing while I'm here is these fog light lenses. Now these always go missing. Probably most people who's owned an E39 and an E46 will know that these always come off, and sometimes they're missing, or the fog lights are cracked as well. That's another thing, you want to make sure they're not cracked. As you see, these ones ain't, and they're not missing, so they're actually really good. I've had many of them where the fog lights have been cracked, X5s, I've had E39s, and it's been missing this cover as well. Even my convertible one that I had of this was. The next thing you're going to want to check is the headlights up here. Now these have got headlight washer system. You want to make sure that these are actually here, and make sure they are there, because if they're not, you'll run into probably MOT problems or inspection problems in the US, as you call it, because they do check if these are working even though they ain't got xenons. Also, the next thing you're going to want to check for on this is, obviously, as I say, just all the bumper and mostly the wings. And as you can see, there's no rust on any of the wings on this car, which is super rare, as most of you in the UK will know. It's very super rare for a car to never have rust on it. So for instance, this one has been very well looked after, and the main way to maintain it and stop it getting rust is to clean it every week and get all the crap from off the road out of the wheel arches and away from the wings, and clean them up as best you can. The next one on the interior side will be the door cards here. Now, as you know, if you have to remove these two window regulators, which on the E46 it is common, they go, you want to make sure that when you remove the door card, there's like a how do we call it, a plastic bit in the back of the door that's stuck with silicone. You want to make sure that's stuck back properly, as what will happen is what will get down here when you open your window from rain, and it will run down the door cards and into your floor mats. The next thing you're going to want to check as well is all the dash interior as well, because as you know, these are suffering from a recall that needs changing on the passenger side airbag, and they need to go and have the recall done. The next one on this car is going to be, if you've got Harman Kardon system or sat nav in this car, you're going to want to check all the system. Like, I know the Harman Kardon system works great. It works perfectly. You press the button, it all comes on and turns on the other speakers. The next thing you're going to want to check is the sat nav system. Now, if the sat nav system isn't working, you're going to want to get it working. It's not hard to do. You just have to check all the buttons, and usually it's to do with the BM54 module in the boot on these. It's not connecting the front of the car. Most of these do come with sat nav and the whole system, but it's not hard to do. You just have to get the BM54 module in the boot. Obviously I do repair them, and obviously I do fit Bluetooth them, Bluetooth music streaming, and also a Bluetooth upgrade the Bluetooth phone system, so you can have all the phone numbers come up on the screen as well, like the newer Bluetooth systems. The next thing you're going to want to check is that the cluster here hasn't got a tamper dot, because a lot of people keep fitting M3 clusters to them, and you want to make sure it's got no tamper dot on it where the mileage has been disreferenced, or anyone's tried to change the mileage, as that's another common problem in this country that a lot of people do. They change the clusters over, they say they just want to change it to M3 looks, but really they change it to avoid mileage, to keep the mileage lower, because the car's got high mileage. The way to avoid that is to take ISTA-D with you, and as I always tell everyone, scan the car with ISTA-D, because it shows you the correct mileage by the LM, and obviously on this car by the GM5 module. So it's very, very easy that they can't manipulate it. If they even try and change clusters, it's got a tamper dot, ISTA-D will tell you. Most people don't know how to clear the EEPROM data, so they won't know how to deal with any of that. The next thing you're going to want to do is check all the window switches down here. Now, obviously the window switches here are very flimsy, so they do break. I know that. I've had many E46s, sorry, that these window switches have broken the center console. It is a common problem. And when they break, they're not hard to replace. You just got to take the center trim out and replace the switches itself. But it's an easy job to fix. But obviously when you're buying a car, you don't want it to have these problems. You've got the right to not have them problems, because you're purchasing, you haven't bought it and it's broke on you where you've got to repair it. The next thing you're going to want to look for on these, and it's a must, is the ABS lights that are not on the traction control. Now, as you know, the ABS modules do fail on these quite often, same as the E39s, and they need a full rear wheel. That's due to the heat inside the engine itself, and end up failing. Luckily on E46 it's inside the cabin itself and it's separate for away from the engine, but it can still fail. That's another common problem. The next one on these will be the electric seats. Now, if you've got electric seats, you'll know on these they're common. I don't know why. On the E46, E39, they end up having a problem with the electrics on the seats, underneath the seats as well, on the modules, end up causing a problem. This one luckily doesn't have electric seats. I tried to opt for one with not. Obviously, the E60's got a lot better and they rectified the problem, but this one didn't. The E46 and E39 suffered. As many of you know, it used to break off on the side of the driver's seat, the control panel all the time, and just come loose, and it would stop working. Just a whole different stage of malarkey. Next thing I would be checking is make sure all the central locking's working on this. As you guys will probably know, the central locking on these have got a very tendency to go out. Usually it's not the central locking itself, it's usually the keys. The battery power ends up losing battery power inside the key itself, and the charge just ends up dropping constantly. The key itself, usually the battery inside it goes bad. It's not usually the central locking on these cars, it's the battery. Again, I can do the keys, I open them up and change the batteries, redo all the circuit board and redo all the buttons as well. So that's another thing I do on these, which I have done on the E61, which the key wasn't working, and now my key is working after sorting it. Obviously the next thing you're going to want to check for on these is, obviously, if it's got Bluetooth module as well. As you've seen in my previous videos, check the Bluetooth. Now, you always know if these cars are Bluetooth because they have the shark fin up here. That's the antenna for the phone itself. Now, most people think that's just stuck on a gimmick. It's not. I assure you that's not. That's actually the proper antenna that BMW fitted when this car was new, and they put the shark fin on that to maintain the radio reception with the phone, and I'll show you why that's there. The phone, if you pull it in the cradle here, which I think this is for a 6310, you'll see that it sits there and charges. That's what it's mostly for. When it goes in there, it maintains good reception the whole way through if you get into a bad area. These days you don't really need it, as they've got enough mast towers up, which is possible. When you come to the car, make sure all the locks come up. That's another way to know if a car's ever been involved in an accident, because most people can't code the car back in with all full central locking, so the door doesn't come up with the central locking on these a lot of the time. What happens is, I think it's from 03 on these, they needed to be coded, and you couldn't just change the door and the central locking would work on these. So that's another thing you're going to want to check, is that all the door locks come up when you unlock the central locking. If they do, everything's fine, and they could need to come up very strongly when you press the central locking key. Another problem that I forgot to mention is the auto rain and light sensor. Now that can go bad. As you know, it sits above here. and sometimes it just needs reinitializing for the auto rain wipers. This one does work, I've tested it, it fully works, but on some cars it don't, and the auto lights don't work. It's another common problem. Another common problem that I forgot to mention is that when water gets in these, you'll see that one of your rear tail lights ain't working. Now in the UK, that'll be an MOT failure, as most of you know. So make sure that all your rear tail lights are working before you go for MOT. It's something I check all the time before MOT. Obviously, again, another thing you will want to check for, which I forgot to add, is your rear tyres and your front tyres. Make sure your tyres are new, because to be honest, you don't want to buy a car and you have to spend on tyres. That's one thing you do not want to have to do. I did on my E60, and the only reason I did that is because that car, it's my admirer, let's put it that way. I love the car more than myself. So you want to be checking your rear tyres and your front tyres, because you don't want to be spending on tyres like these, all Bridgestone all round. They are pretty new, but obviously I probably will end up changing them anyway, because it's a car I plan to keep. So okay guys, now let's move on to the engine. Okay guys, so the first thing you're going to want to look for is your ABS pump, which sits right here, and the next thing you're going to want to look for is obviously water in here, because sometimes water can get down here as well. This is the ABS module itself right here, and this can fail quite often or not. It does fail. They do fail on E39. This one looks like it's been replaced recently or rebuilt, so I take it has been, and also so do the brake lines. Next thing you're going to want to check for under the engine bay is going to be your CCV. This hose right here, this one can crack, as many of you know, which this one is cracked right there, as you can see, and I'm going to be changing it. And it's obviously leaking oil, which you would see in my previous video on my M54 reliability. I showed you the leak down there from the CCV, so we're going to be changing that. Obviously the valve covers on this is a better version than the pre-2000 ones. This is 2003, so it's got the reinforced one. It's not leaking from it, but they do leak, and when they do leak, it's not hard to replace, and you're better off to buy the whole kit with the Vanos seals, which I'm going to go over in a second, with the valve cover gasket, and redo everything at one time, so you don't have to do it again. The next weak point is the Vanos seals itself. This is the whole Vanos unit of the solenoids built in. Now, as you'll see on the M52 engine, the solenoids are separate for the Vanos itself. Vanos adjusters, which the valve cover's got to come off to get to the Vanos adjusters, but on this, valve cover comes off, the solenoids come off with the Vanos itself. The timing doesn't have to be reset, but the seals do perish on them, and it causes rough running, loss of power, and obviously cold start issues as well when the Vanos is bad. So that's another thing you need to look for. Obviously, another thing with these is the coolant system. Now, these cars that are very prone, the same as the E39, to a weak cooling system. Now, the bottom radiator hose here perishes, and so does the top one, as you can see here. I need to change them. The thermostat and water pump sit down here, and they go as well as this fan clutch. Now, a lot of people are in the belief that you don't need to use that, but I'm a strong belief it does work. So therefore, I wouldn't change that. I wouldn't upgrade it to an electric fan either, because that push for this fan right here is a good fan. I call it the viscous fan. Other people call it the water pump fan. It depends on what you want to call it. But as you'll see in my previous videos, I replaced the water pump and the thermostat, and that's a big must on these cars. When you buy them, they must be done. The next one obviously is going to be the radiator hoses. Replace them if you get the chance as well, because they are a very big common problem. If they let go, you're in big trouble. The next one would be the disvalve right here. Now, the disvalve itself does fail. This one luckily has been replaced, so I don't have to worry about that. But these do fail, and they cause a rattling sound, and they cause you a loss of torque, a low down torque. And you'll hear a rattling, and obviously it won't close due to the vacuum, because vacuum operated vacuum meant to shut it off when the engine goes to sleep. The next one will be your intake boot right down there. Now, as you know, I showed on my video as well, this one's been bandaged up. Someone's done a cowboy job here and bandaged up the bit that goes to the idle control valve, because it's a common problem. They do split, and then people just don't want to replace them. Cheap part, I don't know why, and it takes 5 minutes to fit, but who knows. The next thing will be camshaft and crankshaft sensors. Now, they like to eat these sensors like anything, these BMs. I don't know why. As soon as something goes wrong with these cars, that will be it. Everyone will think camshaft sensor faults, but I'll tell you now, it's not always a camshaft sensor fault, but sometimes it is. They are known to go on this car. It's a common problem, and when they do go, it's not hard to replace. They sit right down here. Sometimes the bolts will thread, but it's very easy to get to. And all you have to do is just have knowledge of a car and be able to work on it yourself. It takes 5 minutes to install a new sensor. Crankshaft sensor, not so much, as underneath the car, underneath the manifold that sits on the flywheel itself in the gearbox section. So that's another one that needs replacing. But if you're going to do that, you're going to have to replace all your coolant lines that go run under the intake manifold, as well as the CCV system, as well as everything else under there, so you don't only have to do it all once and never again. The next thing will be the vacuum hoses right here. So you'd run this vacuum hose all the way over here, which is for the brake booster, all the way down. They do perish all the vacuum hoses, and then all you want to do is just change them all. The same goes for these ones right here. They perish and break right here, so they need to be rechanged and replaced. That's a common problem. The next one will be coolant reservoir. These like to crack and cause leaking and explode. Common problem, and it's something that needs to be addressed if it does happen, because it will cause your car to overheat, and you don't want the head gasket to go on these, as these can pull the bolts. Oil filter housing, not so much, it doesn't really go on these. These are very easy to service, as you would have seen in my previous video. I use a siphon pump to drain the oil. So these are very easy engines to look after compared to the M52. I do personally prefer the M54 engine over the M52 engine, as they don't suffer with the same amount of problems as the M52. Some gasket leaks are perfectly normal in this car. It's not something that anyone ever wants to take on, and it's not something that I'd ever think, if you bought this car and you found it had a sump leak, they don't leak that bad to the point you need to warrant changing it. I wouldn't warrant changing it, because the whole engine has to come out just to change the sump gasket. Is it really worth it? No. Majority of the time these cars are on high mileage. Even if they're on low mileage, they probably won't be leaking, but even if they are, they don't lose that much oil. Not all honest opinion, unless you're burning oil like 200 miles, the whole oil every 200 miles, it's not worth changing it. It really ain't. The cabin filter, as you guys know, will sit up here, under here, something that's always dirty. Most people don't ever change them, as when they take it into a garage to have it serviced, that's not part of the service routine. Service routine is just oil service and mostly air filter. Sometimes spark plugs, depending on the owner, if they want to skimp out or cheap out. Spark plugs haven't been done on this, but the rest of the service was done on this car, as many of you guys saw in my video. The oil filter was in good condition. I know the air filter was in good condition, so was the crossing air filter, so I don't believe the spark plugs won't be. Another thing on this would be the O2 sensors. Now, they sometimes can fail, as again, when they do fail, they're not hard to get to, and they're very easily doable from the top of the engine here. I've done them before myself. The next one will be, let's see here, what else have we got here on this car? The drive belt and tensioners. Now, if you do end up getting an oil leak from the valve cover from here, at least from the half moons or anywhere else, I'd advise changing your belts, because what will happen is your belts will come off the drive system and leave you stranded, and probably go around the system and destroy the whole engine. So you're going to want to check your drive belts all the time. As you'll see on my previous video, I have replaced the drive belt. I've got to replace all the tensioners on this as well, and the pulleys, which I am going to be doing. So that's another thing to come up. Another common problem is the MAF sensor. These like to eat MAF sensors. I advise not putting on a performance air filter by any means necessary, because they will eat the MAF sensor, because the oil residue gets stuck on the MAF sensor, causing it to end up failing. So if I was you, avoid using a MAF sensor on these, a performance air filter on these cars to save your MAF sensors. Believe me, they're not cheap, and you don't want them going out, because you can end up with other problems with oil getting in the intake from the performance air filter and causing untold problems. Obviously, the next one would be, if you, as you see here, we got bolts here. This is usually for the secondary air pump on the engines in the US. We don't have the secondary air pump, but if you do, you're going to want to blank that off. As you can see down here, there's the blanking plate right there that we got. It comes blanked automatically. We don't have secondary air pumps here. Our engines, if they're M Sport, they come. We don't really get them at all. The only ones I've seen a secondary air pump on are the E38 728i's, but on the 330s, I've never seen a secondary air pump inside the engine bay here at all. We don't ever get them. As I say, they come with a blanking plate on it, and obviously I can do the Euro tune. Many of you do know, if you are in the US, that the Euro tune is something I can do. If you've been watching Nathan's channel, you'll be aware that I've done it for all his cars, and he just has no problems whatsoever. He's running a EU2 no onboard emissions on his 530i with no issues at all. So is his partner, and so is his mum as well. We're about to do it to his X3. Another thing will be the intake manifold gaskets on these. These like to leak, and if you're going to take the manifold off, I'd advise changing them, because they're not like the M52. These ones actually already flap around, so it's better to change them when they come off as well. That's it, guys, really. Apart from that, we've gone over mostly all the common problems on this car. There isn't really much else to really discuss on this. I think I've walked you through all the common problems on the E46. There isn't really many, apart from rust on the body, and obviously ball joints in your control arms, which most of you know. If you're going to test drive the car, which most of us do here in the UK, you're going to hear the clonking. Obviously, the next thing is to check the gearbox, make sure it goes through all gears. Make sure all gears are operating perfectly. Make sure they're going changing gears smoothly. As you would have seen as well, another thing on these cars is they like a software update. Now, many of you who haven't had a software update wouldn't be aware of this, but these cars drive great. Since I've done a software update, there is no clunking in the gears. It changes gear perfectly. The engine is idle so much better than what it did before. I mean, the software update has completely improved this car. I don't know what BMW done to the mapping, but it's completely transformed this car. I do highly recommend getting the software updated. If your E46 has never been updated. That is a highly recommendation from me. Even driving the car just to where I am now, the gearbox changes so smoothly, I didn't even know it was changing gear. Now, and that you would think in this country we'd hardly ever change the gearbox oil fluid, and I don't think this fluid's ever been changed, but the gearbox is still smooth from like it was from day one. But it has been looked after, so I don't think this car's been treated like crap or driven like crap in its life, which is a good thing. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. If you ain't subscribed already, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel, as I'm trying to grow my subscribers, as you guys know. Thank you for watching. This is BMW Dr. Dean here, and goodbye.